Hello everyone, welcome back to Scarecrow Joe's studio and the paper mache KRAMPUS bust tutorial. In the last segment, which was part 3, we started sculpting and we did quite a bit of work on this bust. The face, some of the face is still wet. It has wet clay on it, not a big deal, because in this segment, which is part 4, we're going to continue on this sculpt. Probably do a little bit more work on the face, and we'll start sculpting out the back of the head, the ears, and of course those horns. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, off camera I went ahead and I painted the inside of the mouth a flat black acrylic paint. Still a little bit wet and tacky in there from the paint. Purpose of painting it now before the sculpture is completely dry and finished is because I'm going to add a tongue. I did decide to add a tongue in there, and my teeth. And if I apply my tongue and my teeth first, it will block in the mouth opening, and I will not be able, it'll be very difficult to get in there with a paintbrush and paint that in. So it's just a flat black in case anything that shows through into the mouth opening in between the teeth and the tongue will not be this stark contrast of a grayish paper mache clay color. But now that that's out of the way, I can continue on with sculpting, and I'm going to start by laying on clay over the back of the head. So as usual, it's just a thin layer of clay, and I do have dry clay in this area that this wet clay is going to meet. So when I go in, after I lay on this thin layer of clay, and then smooth it out with my paste and my paintbrush and then a sculpting tool, I'll probably use the back end of a plastic spoon for that because it works really well for things that are round. I'll make sure that I don't have any ridges showing that meet the wet clay and the dry clay. All right, and then paste in the paintbrush to really just help smooth that out and just apply a little bit more moisture into the clay. And then with the back of the spoon, with that concave back end of a plastic spoon or even a metal spoon, on anything round really, it really helps to smooth out that paper mache clay. So I'm going to go ahead and smooth all of this out. This is completely covered and smoothed out. I don't have any big ridges where my wet clay met the dry clay. It's all smoothed in. It's a little sloppy right now because of the paste that's dripped all over the place, but looks good. Back of the spoon really does a really great job for things like this. If you feel after you've even done that you need to smooth it out even a little bit more, go in with your paintbrush over it with a little bit more paste, and you could get even a smoother finish. All right, before I turn him around, I'm going to focus on also claying over with the thin layer of clay the back of both of the ears. I do have some clay on there from when I attached the ears, strip mached them, and then reinforced them around where they attached to the actual bust head. I used some clay to make sure that they weren't going to fall off while I was sculpting out the rest of it, and it's very strong, very sturdy. But I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to apply a thin layer of clay on the back sides, and then also the front of the ears. And you can see here's clay that is dried that I put on there, but I have all of this remaining. So I'm going to go ahead and do both of the ears and lay on that thin layer of clay and smooth it out with my paste and my brush and a little sculpting tool that I'll use to smooth it out even more. All right, I have that clay over the ears and it's all smoothed out, front and back. And they're not done, but they are for the moment, because I'm really itching to start on these horns here. So if you recall, I did put a thin layer of clay onto the base of the horns where it connected into the head of the Krampus bust here. But now I'm just going to take one horn at a time, and with my clay, I'm going to go ahead and go over that dry clay that's already on there, because I want to be able to sculpt in some details on this. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just going to go around and apply another thin layer of clay over that section, and then a thin layer of clay over this entire horn, and then smooth it out with my paste and the paintbrush again, and also with one of my sculpting tools. Get it really, really smooth. And then after that, I'll show you what we're going to do as far as applying some texture and, you know, some sort of like design elements in here, because these horns are really cool and I want to make them even better with some texture in there. So I'm going to just carry on off camera. I'll do one horn and then come back and show you how to apply some texture in there. Okay, I've wanted the horns completely clayed over. Let me give you a better look of that, all the way around, and it's smoothed out, and I pressed in using the back end of a spoon. If you want to retain this shape, the horn form shape as it is, as we created it, you're going to need to go in and redefine it. And the best way to do that is just by using the back of a spoon. You're probably going to need a good amount of paste, but you just go in, because otherwise it's going to naturally, when you're applying the clay, it's going to naturally want to round itself out. And if you want it round, then you won't have to do this. But if you don't, then you'll have to go in and redefine and create. On the bottom of the horns, I did, I smoothed that into that dry clay. I want to put a little pattern in just the base of the horn. So another one of my little ball tools here. You can get these super cheap off of Amazon. But there are many different things that you could use, but I'm using my little ball tool, and I'm just going in and I just want to press in. I think it makes it look a little bit more interesting, the base of the horn. And after I have that little pattern in there, I'm just going in with some more paste and a paintbrush. Just kind of even it out a little bit. I don't want this to be perfect looking. I don't want it to be perfect and pristine looking. He's a monster. So it doesn't need to be perfect or pristine looking. But if you're creating horns for something else that you want to be perfect and pristine looking, then you would take more time and make sure that everything's even out. Yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. For patterning on the rest of the horn, you could use whatever you want. If you want to press in some texture, some like rounded textures, you could put some lines in there and You can go all the way around like that. Press in any kind of texture that you want into your horn. I don't want that in my horn though. I only want this bottom part to be textured. But it's completely up to you. You could use as much texture in there as you want. And you could gouge out some areas in your horn, you know, make them look like, if you want him to, you know, look like he's really been using these horns, gouge out some of those areas in there. But that's pretty much all that I'm going to do with the horns on my character. That's the gist of it. Do as much as you want, do as little as you want. It's completely up to you. It's your character. But that's all that I'm going to do for the horns. Off camera, I'm going to go ahead and get the other horn done. Okay, so off camera, I did complete the other horn. So this is what they look like now. I didn't get back to actually sculpting in the other horn for about 24 hours. I had to stop what I was doing and come back to it. But so this horn is completely dry. So you could get, here's a better look at some of the texture, and this one is wet. I just literally finished that one. But we're going to switch gears and go back to finishing up these ears now. Okay, for the ears, because I don't want to bulk them out a whole lot more than what they already are, I'm going to go back to my cotton. So the cotton is what I used around the eyes to give the eyelid, fleshy eyelid type of an effect. So I've got some cotton here, just different. I just, you know, tore off some pieces in different lengths, and I'm going to go ahead and work on the ears by bulking them up and shaping them out and forming them with cotton dipped in my paste. And I'm going to do both ears at the same time. So again, just dipping some of my cotton into my paste and kind of wringing the excess paste off. And I'm going to start by just going around the rim of the ear and applying some of that cotton. I'm going to go all the way down to where the base of the ear is. So let me turn this right along the edge of the ear is where I'm applying it. You can use paper mache clay, very thin amount. In my opinion, for little details like this, and if you don't want to add more bulk with the clay, this is the way to go. So I got that one done. I'm going to go ahead and do the same on this, the other ear here. I'm working on these simultaneously because, again, I want symmetry as much as I can achieve symmetry. And if you have pieces that might be a little too long, you could just cut a little piece of it off. You can also, even if one of your pieces is too thin, you can overlap them. That's not a big deal either. So I'm kind of looking at them at the same, same angles. I'm going to do the same here with the cotton. I'm going to go all the way around these areas. And then to make sure that they're going to adhere, just make sure you're pressing them down onto your dry clay. You could even apply these to wet clay if your clay is still wet. That's fine. You don't have to wait for your clay to dry to incorporate this effect with the cotton. But I have this little tool here, but you could use anything to kind of just press it down. Here's the other side. I want to bulk up, so this is a big string of cotton here. I'm going to bulk up around this area, and so I'm just basically butting that piece of cotton right up against the other one that I just laid on. And I want to come in and make just sort of a really interesting ear form. What do Krampus ears look like? I don't know. I mean, I've seen pictures and they're pointy, they're weird looking. What do monster ears look like? Well, I think the short answer to that is whatever you want them to look like. They're monsters. You really can't go wrong. So I'm going to do the same side over here so that they're pretty much uniform. And if you want something symmetrical, make sure that, again, you're forming the same sides, you know, same time. And comparing, going back and comparing. All right, that looks okay. I'm okay with that. We'll take a smaller bit of the cotton. And you know, if you have a reference of an ear, like a monster ear, or you know, anything like that, go ahead and use a reference picture. Elf ears are really good references for things like this. But I just took a little small piece of cotton, did a little loop there. Do the same thing on the other side. So that's looking pretty good. It's giving it a lot more interest. I think I'm going to do a little bit more. So again, another piece of cotton. So I think I want to come down here and attach that. And I think I'm going to bulk up so it has like sort of like an earlobe. So I'm just taking another piece of cotton and just sort of laying it in there. Okay, I just added a little bit more in the earlobe areas for those ears. And I think what I want to do, I want to bulk up. I want to make this a little bit thicker. So again, with some of my cotton. And you can blend your edges a little bit. If you have like, you could even use like a toothpick. You could blend those edges just a little bit. Because those fine pieces of cotton will just, when they're saturated, they're sculptable, really. I mean, you can even put added texture in there, such as this, where I'm just pressing in some texture, some lines in there. But you do want to make sure that it's pressed down onto that, into your clay, onto your clay. And when this dries, it's going to be very, very hard and it will stay put. I'm going to do the other side. Okay, this segment is not finished, so don't sign off or log off yet. As you could see here, I did a lot more work. I didn't mean for it to be off camera, but it ended up being off camera because some of my footage was corrupted, so it was unusable, unfortunately. Sorry about that. I am not a filmmaker. I'm a sculptor. I do the best that I can with filming these tutorials. But I did a lot more work, and I'm going to give you a closer look at this momentarily and go over a few things on how I created the tongue and the teeth and what else I did on the sculpture that you're not going to be able to see me actually do. But before I get into that and show you all of that stuff, I am going to show you how to make the teeth using the thermoplastic pellets, where you melt them and then you can form them. So that's coming up right now. Okay, let's have a quick look at what I did off camera. Aside from creating the teeth and the tongue and inserting them or attaching them to the mouth, I also did a little bit more sculpting up on the top of the head. So you could see that. I put in just a little bit more in here and built up around right in here. And I pressed in some texture lines, like some wrinkle lines. So those are going to show is where, you know, this damage here that I put in intentionally in a former video. But all of this texture in here, after it's painted, it's going to come through really well. The other thing that I did was I felt like that nose was kind of weak. It wasn't fierce enough. Like it didn't have that that look of a snarl or the beginnings of a snarl. So I added some more clay in there and I kind of pushed it up and I added some wrinkle texture lines in that nose area. The other thing that I did was I bulked up in the cheek area, so right underneath the ridge from the bottom of the eye there that I created previously. I went in and I bulked up some more clay into the cheek area, as well as bulking up a little bit more clay in these areas here of the ear, and then down in here bulked up some more clay in there, and then right around in there. So now it kind of has like what resembles a little bit of more of an ear canal. The reason that I did that is because I really, just looking at it, I felt like the sculpture, these ears didn't look three-dimensional enough for my liking. They looked very flat. So now they do not look flat at all. They're much more three-dimensional. So these ears are done. And then the mouth, I formed the tongue. This tongue is made out of polymer clay. And I'm actually going to make another one to show you exactly how I got that shape and what to do to insert it, as well as forming and all of this stuff that's flaking off. That's just paste. But I also am going to show you how I formed these teeth. Now, some of them are polymer clay, but the majority of them I ended up using the thermoplastic pellets, which I'm going to get into right now. All this stuff that's on the tongue needs to be repainted, but obviously I painted the tongue prior to inserting the teeth, and you're going to want to do that. You're going to want to do that because if you look closely, there is teeth underneath the tongue. So you want to put your tongue in there, get it in there, and so that you have room down here to put your teeth so that it looks like the tongue is actually coming up over the teeth and not just sitting flat against like what would be a gum line or the lips. But let me carry on here and show you how to form and create the tongue out of polymer clay and how to form and create the teeth using the thermoplastic pellets. So if you recall, these thermoplastic pellets were they came in a vacuum sealed plastic bag. Once you open it, you're going to need to transfer them into something else, and I just put them in a big Ziploc bag. That's where they're at right now. And then they come with a set of instructions here. And I did follow these at first when I was experimenting. First step, pour some of the particles into a container. The container that I'm going to use is this ceramic small teacup, tea mug. So you pour particles into the container, add warm water, at least 70 degrees Celsius or above. So it does need to be hot water. And then after that, you kind of wait for the particles to clear and stick together. And it says it usually takes 1 to 2 minutes. I found that it took less than that, but that really depends on your water temperature. And then next step here, number 4, remove the particles from the water with a tool. I ended up using a little fork, a metal fork. And then you could use it says use your hands, molds, or tools to make models to your liking. So yeah, you could actually, I haven't tried it yet, but you have silicone molds. You can press this material into a silicone mold, and supposedly it works. Again, I have not tried that. It dries and cools at room temperature, and then when it does dry and cool, it becomes more of an opaque white color. Basically, it turns back to the color of the original pellets. So, step 1, I'm just going to take a small handful of the pellets. So there you go, just like that. And then I'm going to go up into my kitchen, put on my electric tea kettle. I don't need to get it boiling, but I do need to get the water hot. And then I'll pour some water in here and come back down and show you how to form these things. Okay, I think you can see that, and how after adding some, it was very hot water that I added. Like I said, it doesn't have to be boiling, but it does have to be hot. But they're pretty much opaque or translucent at this point. They're translucent. So that means they're ready to go. I'm just going to take a fork, and when they come out, they're still kind of clumped together, and they start cooling pretty quick. So I'm just going to take a little bit, and you can just put the rest back in there. But it's all melty, and you can, at that point, like you're going to do a tooth shape, just start forming your tooth shape. I basically formed them the same way that I did the teeth that I made with polymer clay. Just they're made out of melted plastic. So there you have it. It's pretty simple. Talk about pros and cons here. The pros of this material is it's easy to work with. I mean, it's very easy to form and shape. And then let me show you one that's cooled. So here is one that is cool. And I'll show you, this is just a different shape. So those are 2 different shapes there. Going back to pros and cons. It's easy to use, and you don't need to use very many of them. Just a few of them at a time, and you could basically shape anything. That is one positive thing about this material. The other positive thing about this material, and I want to do this before my water starts cooling too much, is that if you form a shape and you don't particularly like the shape that you formed, let's just use let's use the tooth that I just did. So now that it's cooled and hardened, it turns white. I can put that shape, if I don't like it, I can put it back into that hot water. And once it starts to turn, my hot water isn't very hot anymore, unfortunately, but it'll start to turn that opaque color again. And then once it does, it hasn't done it completely, but you could see some of the areas are starting to turn opaque. You can reshape it. So it's reusable as well. So yeah, if you don't like a shape that you created, stick it back in some really hot water and you can reuse that stuff. Another positive is that it works. I mean, they work really well. They look great. So this one is polymer clay, and then the ones in the rest of this row are all the thermoplastic. on the bottom here, these three right underneath the tongue are polymer clay. And then the rest of these around it are the thermoplastic pellets. So I like the material. Really, I think in my mind, the only con or negative to this material is that if you put it in an extremely hot environment, which I don't think anybody's going to do, these could melt. They could melt. I mean, it's got to be pretty hot. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and show you how I created that tongue and describe as best I can on how I inserted it into the mouth. I use Sculpting Original, so this is the package, Original Sculpting. So for this tongue here, I basically just took a ball of clay, and that's going to depend on how big you want your tongue. So for this particular tongue shape, I just started forming. So this would be the back of that tongue where so I flattened it out because that's where I pushed it into the back there after it was dry. So after it was cooled and hardened. So when you are forming your tongue, make sure that before you bake it in the oven, that you have the area and the contact that you want when you put it back into your mouth. Because you're going to hot glue it to the bottom of the mouth, and you want to push it back as far as you can. So this part right here is basically the back of the tongue. And then I just kind of took the rest of the clay. And you could do this if you want a thick tongue, if you want any shape of a tongue, this is going to work. So I just started forming my tongue. And then I want to put a little bit of texture in there. So from the back, I just kind of drew in with a little sculpting tool. Again, you could use there's many different things that you can use for this. Toothpicks work great. So I kind of drew in like a center line, and then I took this other little sculpting tool here. It's just a little pointy end, and again, you can use pretty much anything. And I just started pressing in some little dots. And I did it all over the top of the tongue. Anything that was going to be showing, this is kind of too thick down here, but anything that was going to be showing, and so on the sides, any area of the tongue that's going to be protruding and you want to have texture, and I think it lends it a little bit more interest. Now to form it, really easy. You can take it, you can turn it, and then you can angle it however you want. And then when you put this, I used a pie pan, so a round pie pan, something that has a baking pan that has a little bit of a wall. So because you want it to retain this shape. So I kind of propped it up on this angled area where this part kind of hung over a little bit on the wall, so it had a little bit of a brace. And when it comes out of the oven, it'll be nice and hard, and it'll retain whatever shape that you want your tongue to be. You want it pointed, make a pointy end, just like I did here. But that's the gist of it. 285 degrees for about 15 minutes, but follow your package instructions when you're baking whatever polymer clay. And then for painting, you want to pre-paint it just like I pre-painted the inside of the mouth to make it easier on yourself. And the color that I painted it is, this is Apple Barrel brand. It's matte and it's tapestry wine. There's some paste that dripped on here, so I do need to go in there and repaint a little bit, but I like the color, and it looks pretty good. The color's not like really uniform. There's some darker spots, there's some lighter spots, but inside the texture, you can see the texture and the lines and everything that I put in there. So it turned out to be a really cool effect. Last thing that I want to mention is that around the mouth, so I hot glued in the teeth, I hot glued in the tongue, I hot glued in the teeth right onto the surface area of the mouth, of the mouth opening. You know, that's going to look really funny if you don't have like a lip line or anything like that. So what I did, I went back to my cotton. So same thing that I did for eyelids here to get a effect of fleshy eyelid. And then around my ears, I did the same thing around the mouth. Now, this effect is twofold. First of all, it's going to permanently hold those teeth into place instead of just hot glue. And you're probably questioning, okay, that thermoplastic pellets, when you added the hot glue to them, did they melt? No, they did not. You know, you're just using a small amount on the tooth and just pressing it in. Now, of course, hot glue on the surface will not hold it permanently. They have a tendency to fall off. But if you use this method, you're creating a lip line with the cotton, and right over where you hot glued your teeth onto your bust, it's going to permanently hold those in place. So it's twofold: sculptural detail as well as adhesion. I did not do any sculpting or details or anything on the back of the head or on his back. Again, because I'm going to attach hair and fur. So there is no point in me sculpting anything on the back of the head. If your head is going to be showing from all angles, then you're going to want to maybe, you can use very, very thin pieces of cotton or even very, very thin pieces of string, and you can lay it on and create veins as a textural element to lend more interest to any of these areas that you wish. I was not going to apply any more texture to the horns. I was just going to leave them as it is. Still debating on whether I'm going to do anything with the horns. I may end up doing that, but that's going to be off camera. One other thing that I want to mention is that in the drying process, I ended up with some separation from the bust to the piece of wood here. So that's an easy fix. I'm just going to go in with a little bit of clay, and wherever those gaps are, I'm just going to fill in and blend with some more clay, and that should take care of it. Also, if you do have some areas where, I don't know, you probably can't see it, but there's a little bit of a separation here where my clay dried and then it created like a little crack. It's still structurally sound. I mean, these are in there very secure, but if that bothers you, again, you take a little bit of clay with your paste, make sure it's moist, and you can fill in any of those cracks. And you can do that anywhere on your sculpture. All right, so next segment coming up, painting, and then laying on hair, fur, and any kind of other material, fabric material that I might be using or that you might be using. And then this sculpture is going to be completely finished. But that's a wrap on this one. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got something out of it. If you have not already done so, hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, like the video. That helps the channel a lot. And as always, I thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.